Hi, welcome to part 3, where we will focus on drawing the hair and making it feel full of life and movement. By now, we've already worked on laying down the foundation of the portrait with the underdrawing, face features and skin tones. Now it's time to give our subject's hair the attention it deserves. I'm going to walk you through the steps I take when creating the hair and share some tips that will help you achieve a more realistic and dynamic look. I'm Asia, a part-time artist who works mainly with color pencils, and I'm excited to guide you through this step. If you're following along with your own portrait, feel free to use these techniques to refine your hair drawing. And remember, watch carefully, as I will give tips along the way to help with your own artistic journey. When I start drawing hair, the first thing I do is focus on the highlights. I use white color pencil to mark the brightest points where the light hits the hair the most. These highlights are crucial because they will add a layer of realism and vibrancy to the hair. For this particular portrait, I wanted to create a sense of strong lighting and contrast, so I made sure to accentuate the highlights to give the hair more drama and depth. As this portrait is inspired by autumn colors, I'm using a warm color palette for the hair. The rich, earthy tones of autumn create a beautiful contrast with the skin tones we worked on earlier. For the lighter section of the hair, I start with a warm, soft yellow pencil. This color will represent the parts of the hair where the light hits most directly. It's essential to create this light effect early on, as it sets the stage for how the hair will appear in the finished piece. Next, I use a muted orange pencil to mark the slightly darker sections of the hair. These are areas that aren't in direct light, but still catch a bit of brightness. The orange helps bring warmth to the hair while giving it depth and dimension. I apply this color to the parts of the hair that are more in shadow but still catch some ambient light. Once the highlights and light areas are established, I move on to the darker sections. I use brown to fill in the deeper parts of the hair, where less light reaches. This is where the volume and texture of the hair begin to form. The brown provides a solid foundation for the hair structure and depth. Make sure to layer this in thin, even strokes to keep it smooth and controlled. The next step involves using a dark sepia pencil to define the deepest shadows. The dark sepia works well because it's a rich, deep color that enhances the contrast and adds a realistic touch to the texture. Focus on the areas near the roots or places where strands naturally overlap or fall into the shadow. An important part of drawing hair is to think about its flow and natural direction. Hair doesn't grow in a perfect grid. It moves in soft sweeping curves or jagged sharp angles depending on the hairstyle. When applying your colored pencils, follow the rhythm of the hair strands. Whether the hair is flowing in gentle waves or is tightly curled, observe and mimic the movement. This is where you can start adding texture to the drawing. One helpful technique is to think of the hair as blocks of color. Instead of focusing on individual strands at first, start by breaking the hair down into larger blocks. These blocks represent the different shades and values in the hair. Think of it as laying down a blueprint before adding in the finer details. This approach helps create a cohesive and balanced look across the hair. Once the basic structure of the hair is in place, I begin to refine the details. Hair is made up of individual strands, so now it's time to go back and add finer details. In this stage, I use a variety of colors to add complexity and interest to the hair. In this case, I might use reds, dark browns, and even purple hues to bring out different tones and textures in the hair. These steps gives the hair that natural complexity. No two strands are exactly the same, and we want to reflect that in our drawing. As I work on the smaller strands, I try to keep the texture of the hair soft yet defined. For these finer details, I use a sharp pencils so I can create the look of individual hair strands without overworking the paper. Sharpening the pencil before you work on these smaller areas is crucial to ensure the hair doesn't look smudged or overly blunt. To blend and smooth out the transitions between the light and dark areas of the hair, I use a Caran d'Ache luminance pencils in light beige or light skin tones. I use a white pencil for additional highlights. This will help emphasize those bright areas where the light hits the hair most directly. I may also use a touch of light beige or pale pink on the brightest spots to create the illusion of a beautiful shine. This makes the hair appear more polished and gives it that reflective, healthy shine. When drawing hair, the patience is also a key. Layering the colors gradually helps achieve a more realistic look. Don't rush the process. Take your time to build the tones, blend and shape the hair with careful attention. Hair often has a lot of movement, and allowing your strokes to follow that movement will give it a natural flow. As I've mentioned, think of hair as a series of blocks of color first, then add more intricate detail as you refine. This method keeps your approach organized and avoids overwhelming you with too much detail at once. Once you've laid down your main shapes, you can focus on enhancing the texture and vibrancy with a variety of colored pencils. When drawing hair, it's essential to approach it as an intricate mix of colors and subtle tonal shifts, rather than just a simple mess of lines. The beauty of hair lies in its multitude of shades and undertones. Even the simplest hair color has a wide range of hues present within it, from warmer reds and yellows to cooler blues and greens. It's important to blend and balance these tones carefully, so they complement each other and remain realistic. You don't want the effect to be too bold, so always keep your color choices subtle and in harmony with the overall portrait. If the hair seems too flat or lacks dimension, a good technique is to gradually build up the contrast between the shadows and highlights. You can do this by darkening the deeper sections, like the parts near the roots, and then adding highlights to the areas where light would naturally hit. This process will give your hair a much more three-dimensional appearance. I like to use soft, light beige pencils from Caran d'Ache Luminance in the lighter areas to create a delicate shimmer. This gives the hair a more natural, soft glow, almost as if light is bouncing off the strands. At the edges of the hair, where strands might be more defined or stray, I love using sharpened pencils to add those final details. It's a great way to make the hair look more dynamic and realistic. A personal favorite of mine is using a white pencil on this brown paper to add little highlights or stray strands. This not only adds a fresh touch, but also creates a striking contrast, making the hair pop and look even more lifelike. Throughout this series, we've taken a deep dive into the art of creating a realistic portrait, focusing on every detail from the face features, skin tones, to the highlights and shadows in the hair. Each stage is a delicate balance of building layers, refining shapes, and adding contrast to breathe life into the drawing. The hair, being such a prominent feature, can make or break the overall feel of the portrait. It's not just about the color, but about understanding how light interacts with the hair, how strands move, and how textures can be portrayed with just the right touch. As we've seen in the process, subtlety is the key to achieving a realistic, dynamic portrait. Whether it's using unconventional colors to enhance the shadows and highlights, or focusing on the small details that make the hair seem full of movement, it all comes down to patience and attention to detail. Each stroke of the pencil adds another layer of life to the piece, and every decision, no matter how small, contributes to the overall composition. This concludes the final part of this portrait drawing series. I hope you found these tips and techniques useful, as we've gone step by step through the process of creating a realistic and detailed portrait. From mapping out the skin tones and facial features to refining the hair and adding those final highlights, each part of the portrait requires patience, observation, and a careful approach to color and texture. Throughout this series, we've covered key concepts like layering, building depth with subtle tones, and focusing on how light interacts with different surfaces. Whether you're a beginner or more advanced, it's important to keep experimenting and refining your skills, as that's how you will continue to grow as an artist. Remember that portrait drawing is about capturing the essence of the person, not just their appearance. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become in your ability to observe and translate what you see onto paper. Don't be afraid to explore new techniques and colors. Each drawing is a step towards mastering your craft. Thank you so much for following along with this series. I hope you've gained some valuable insights into creating portraits and feel inspired to continue your artistic journey. Keep practicing and don't forget to have fun with the process. If you've enjoyed this series and want to learn more from me, make sure to check out my YouTube channel or Patreon page, where I will continue sharing more tips, tricks, and drawing tutorials in the future. Keep practicing and remember that the more you draw, the more your technique will evolve. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you and seeing your work. Thank you so much for watching, and bye bye!